Hello there, weary listener. Today, our destination isn't a majestic castle or a glorious battlefield. Today, we are going on a trip, but not on a plane, and certainly not on a panoramic train through Europe. We are going by cart in the Middle Ages. Yes, a wooden rectangle pulled by a tired horse, or if luck has completely abandoned us, by a pair of equally indecisive oxen. Before your mind conjures up a romantic scene with rolling green hills and church bells ringing in the distance, forget it. It might have been beautiful, sure. The problem is that nobody saw it. The swarms of flies and the constant violent rocking of the cart made every landscape look identical, brown and repetitive. Traveling in this era was the medieval version of a complete hassle, dust in your lungs, a spine begging for mercy, and a very real chance of falling into a hole and never being seen again. There were no roads, there was only organized mud, and every rock on the path was a reminder that the concept of comfort had not yet been invented. Relax, you don't need to get out of bed for this. Just lie back, take a deep breath, and let the sheer monotony of this journey lull you to sleep. Oh, and before the horse bolts, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below where you're listening from and what time it is. Who knows, we might discover you're running later than a medieval cart. And hit the bell icon so you don't miss any stories from Sleep with a Tired Story. Because here, sleep arrives before the end, so you might as well click the like button now. This helps this tired content reach more sleepy souls who still believe in a good story before bed. Now turn off the light, adjust your pillow and come with me. You start the day by stepping in something soft. It could be mud, it could be horse manure, or it could be both, which, considering the average hygiene of the Middle Ages, is the most likely scenario. The ground of the road is a mosaic of everything civilization has thrown away. Feces, straw, and the optimism you still held onto yesterday. In the morning darkness, the sun hasn't even properly risen, and you already feel the cold seeping through the seams of your clothes. Technically, you are going traveling. In practice, you are merely being slowly shaken into a state of resignation. The cart is there waiting. 2 wheels, a bent axle, and a plank of wood that looks like it survived a war. And perhaps it has. It is the available vehicle. If your dream involves lower back pain, inertia, and a soundtrack of screeching timber, hop on. The seat isn't exactly a seat. It's an improvised board covered by a cloth that has seen more people than the village tavern. The smell is a mixture of horse, old sweat, and something that probably died right there sometime between the past few winters. The cart shakes before it even leaves its spot, a sign that things will get worse. When the horse starts to walk, the entire world turns into a sequence of violent jolts. Every stone is a mountain. Every pothole is a reminder that the concept of shock absorbers would only be invented centuries later, probably by someone with a shattered spine and a talent for useful inventions. The average speed is something between a tired slug and a drifting log. In theory, the cart can reach 5 km/h if the horse is inspired and the path isn't taken over by mud, fallen trunks, pilgrims, and occasionally a cow looking at you with superiority. Traveling in the Middle Ages was a social event. It's you, 2 barrels of cabbage and a miracle, all trying not to tip over. The wind cuts your face. The smell of manure is constant. You try to breathe through your mouth, which is a mistake. The air tastes of smoke, dust, and despair. The holes in the road are deep enough to test the faith of any traveler. Every time the horse stumbles, you think about getting down and continuing on foot, but you soon remember that walking would be worse. The cart, at least, gives you the illusion of movement. After an hour, you realize you've traveled about 2 kilometers. That is, if you haven't taken the wrong path. And you probably have. Medieval roads didn't have signs or reliable maps. They had crosses, holes, and sometimes a piece of wood stuck in the mud, a silent memento of someone who didn't make it. Turn after the landmark was the medieval GPS. The sun rises slowly, and the heat begins to boil inside the thick fabric of your clothes. There is no ventilation, no breeze, only the smell of leather and sweat. You adjust your position, trying to find comfort, and discover that it is impossible. The seat is harder than 3-day-old bread. Every minute is a reminder that traveling and suffering were basically synonyms. Along the road, you cross paths with other travelers, barefoot pilgrims, merchants carrying sacks of wheat, monks murmuring prayers that sound more like complaints than blessings. Everyone is dirty, tired, and wears the same look of someone who has already given up on the glamour of adventure. The romanticism of medieval travel was invented centuries later, probably by someone who never had to push a cart stuck in the mud. You pass over a wooden bridge that creaks, as if making a point to remind you it's old. The water down below runs slowly, dark, smelling of stagnant water and old filth. At a certain point, the horse decides to stop. Just like that, out of nowhere, he looks at the horizon like someone contemplating the meaning of life and concluding it isn't worth continuing. You get down, give 2 little pats on his neck, and try to keep calm. He's just thinking, you murmur, also thinking about how many vertebrae you still have intact. Time passes slowly. The sound of wheels becomes background noise and nothing else. Wood against stone, stone against wood, a constant numbing rhythm, almost relaxing. If it weren't for the fact that every jolt reminds you that the coccyx is an underestimated structure. Deep down, perhaps this was the medieval secret to sleep. Travel by cart until the body simply gives up. By late afternoon, the sky begins to change. Grey. The kind of grey that warns of rain, mud, and regret. You pull up your hood and grumble. This is going to be beautiful. In medieval language, beautiful meant this is going to be a lot of work. The rain falls in thick, heavy drops, mixing dust, sweat, and resignation. You try to cover yourself with a cloth, but it only serves to spread the dampness. The path turns into sludge. The cart sinks a little more with every meter. The horse grumbles. You simply watch nature trying to swallow you back up. At some point, the wheel locks. You get down, stick your leg knee-deep into the mud, and start pushing. When the wheel finally breaks free, the horse takes a false step and almost falls. You let out a muffled curse, which probably guarantees a mild curse upon your soul. Then you return to the seat, exhausted, cold, wet, and still with half the journey ahead. The trip continues slowly, ironically, inevitably, and so the day follows. The same noise, the same rocking, the same desire to jump off and pretend you were abducted by Benedictine monks. But you endure it, because traveling in the Middle Ages wasn't about arriving. It was about surviving the commute. Spoiler, not everyone made it. The rain continues and so does the mud. The cart, now heavier than your own will to live, sinks with every meter. The horse pulls, grumbles, and you match the rhythm, trying not to think about the fact that this animal is probably smarter than you for not having chosen to travel. The mud rises to your ankles, and the smell, well, the smell is a mixture of wet earth and sour sludge. The wheels make a strange noise, a squeak that sounds like a warning, but you pretend it's normal. In the Middle Ages, everything that squeaks is normal. The doors, the bones, the dreams. You try to animate the animal with a shout of encouragement, something between "let's go" and "for the love of God." But he simply lets out a sigh of exhaustion, worthy of someone who understood the futility of life long before philosophy was written down. The path narrows. On one side trees, on the other more mud, ahead fog, and in the middle of it all you with soaked clothes, numb hands, and a backside begging for help. Every bump is a reminder that the human body was not made for this. Or perhaps it was, and the mistake was evolving. The rain begins to lessen, but the cold remains. You feel your fingers hardening on the wooden handle that serves as a rein, and the wet leather slips. The horse trips on a branch, and the cart almost tips over. You hold on by reflex or desperation. Your heart races for a second. Then it returns to the normal rhythm of someone who has already accepted their fate. On the road, you meet another traveler, an old man with an even more precarious cart, pulling it himself without a horse. Just willpower and a lack of options. He passes, gives a slow nod, and continues. No words are exchanged, but there is mutual understanding. Misery recognizes its own species. You decide to stop for a bit. Your body aches and your belly begins to complain. It's not hunger, it's a protest. You take from your bag a piece of bread hard enough to be used as a defense weapon. You bite with effort, trying to fool your stomach and boredom at the same time. The taste is of old flour and resignation. At least it isn't moldy yet. While you chew, you observe your surroundings. Abandoned fields, dry branches, a crow standing there watching you. Just that. The road, despite being deserted, holds strange noises. Snaps, whispers, maybe the wind, maybe people. Traveling alone always brings this doubt, whether the noise comes from the forest or your head. You stand up, crack your neck, and go back to pushing the cart. The wheels turn with resistance. The wood groans as if it also had an opinion. The horse obeys more out of inertia than will. And with every meter, the destination remains far away. Hours pass, or what seems like an eternity. The sun appears between the clouds just to mock you, reflecting in the mud puddles, and reminding you that heat and humidity form the worst possible combination. You try to adjust the cloak on your shoulders, but it weighs heavy. Everything weighs heavy. The cloth, the cart, life itself. Further ahead, a fork in the road. No sign, no plaque, no saint willing to help. One path leads toward the forest, the other to an open field, both equally threatening. You choose the left because the horse turned that way, and honestly, arguing with him would require more energy than you have. The terrain improves a little. The mud gives way to loose stones, which is technically progress. The problem is that the stones hit the wheels, and every impact echoes through your body like a reminder that medieval medicine doesn't cover hernias. You adjust yourself on the seat, take a deep breath, and try to think of something positive. Nothing comes. Time moves on. You see a small inn in the distance, or what looks like one. 4 crooked walls, a leaky roof, and a hanging sign swinging in the wind, written with something that could be ink or something else. The horse seems excited, which convinces you it must be the destination. When you get closer, the smell of smoke and onions hits you like a punch. A good sign. It means there is fire, and with luck, food. You tie the horse to a trunk and push the door, which opens with a groan, worthy of a horror movie. Inside, 6 figures stand still. One man sleeps on the table, another seems awake, but his fixed stare at nothing suggests otherwise. You approach the counter. A woman with a dirty scarf stares at you with suspicion. "A plate and a corner to sleep," you say, trying to sound less miserable than you are. She responds with a grunt and points to a bench. Translation: sit and wait. The plate arrives, a thin broth with something floating in it that could be an onion or a memory. You eat in silence, observing the soot-covered walls and the dripping ceiling. The conversation around is low, made of murmurs and coughs. It's the kind of place where nobody asks anything, and everyone seems relieved by that. A fat man in the corner starts to sing out of tune, some tavern song dragging the words. Another laughs without teeth. You pretend not to hear. The spoon scrapes the bottom of the bowl, and the sound is almost comforting. At least now there is something warm in your stomach. When night falls completely, the innkeeper shows you the room, a space behind a curtain. On the floor, a pile of damp straw and a blanket that once belonged to someone. Maybe it still does in some spiritual sense. You lie down not out of desire, but out of a lack of options. The body doesn't rest, it gives up. Outside, the sound of rain returns. Heavy drops hitting the roof, the wind entering through the cracks, and the horse grumbling tied up outside. You think you should be sleeping, but the noise of the wood and the buzzing of the wind create an annoying, continuous noise. Your mind begins to wander. Maybe tomorrow the road will improve, maybe not, probably not. The straw itches. Something moves in the corner. A rat, perhaps. Or two. You pretend you didn't see it. Pretending is part of survival. Pretending everything is fine. Pretending it's normal to share a bed with vermin. Pretending the trip is worth it. It is the theater of medieval life, with free entry and a doubtful exit. You close your eyes, but the sound of the rain seems to mock you. Every drop is a reminder that tomorrow is just more road, more mud, more dust, more discomfort. The horse outside lets out a short whinny, almost a lament, and you understand perfectly. And so the night follows, cold, damp, and without haste. The cart rests outside, waiting for the next day to continue what should never have started. The wrong idea that traveling is good. In the Middle Ages, freedom was just a pretty name for exhaustion. Tomorrow arrives without asking permission. The sound of roosters is the daily reminder that rest ended too soon. Again, you open your eyes with the sensation of having slept inside a bag of rocks. And perhaps you have. The straw under your body feels wetter than yesterday, which is a mystery, since it didn't rain inside the inn. Or maybe it did. The roof has more holes than monastery cheese. The first step of the day is a diplomatic struggle between the body and the will. The body loses, as always. You get up slowly, stretching your bones with noises that would make an old windmill jealous. The horse waits for you outside, looking with that passive-aggressive expression typical of someone who knows they're going to pull all the weight again. And they are. The innkeeper appears collecting for the stay. He names an absurd price, as if the room were a castle suite and not a colony of fleas. You argue that the bread came hard and the broth came alive, but he just smiles. The kind of smile that shows more threat than teeth. In the end, you hand over 2 coins, half of what you have. The other half you keep for chance or for bad luck, whichever comes first. Back on the road, the wind is cold but dry, a temporary relief. The wheels creak, the horse stumbles, and you try to convince yourself that you are used to it. The truth is that the human body doesn't get used to discomfort. It just gives up complaining. And that is what you do. A few kilometers ahead, you encounter a group standing still. 3 armed men, not soldiers, but the kind of people who self-declare authority. One of them wears a crooked hat and an expression of borrowed superiority. "Passage tax of the feudal lord," he says, extending his hand. You try to explain that you are just passing through, that the cart carries nothing but tools and despair, but he doesn't seem interested in details. Everything that passes pays. You hand over a coin and a look of silent hatred. He accepts the coin and ignores the look. The second man rummages through the cart lazily, poking the sack of oats you swore was invisible. They laugh amongst themselves, and you understand that the laughter is the extra tax. After they walk away, you continue, feeling a little lighter, financially and morally defeated. The road seems to mock you, opening into long curves that never lead anywhere. The landscape is the same. Dry fields, stones, and the occasional orchard belonging to someone who would kill for an apple. Literally. In the middle of the afternoon, you meet a group of travelers on foot. Pilgrims, they say, or at least they seem to be. One of them carries a staff and doubtful faith. The other, a wooden cross so heavy it looks like punishment, not devotion. They ask you for a ride, you look at the cart, look at them and do the math. More weight, more slowness, more suffering. And for some reason, you say yes. The first one climbs up and thanks you in Latin, or in something that tries to be Latin and fails miserably. The second settles beside you with breath that reveals weeks of penance without soap. Now the cart moves even slower. The horse seems to judge you. You don't argue. The conversations begin. They talk of faith, of miracles, of how a woman in Avignon saw the Virgin's face in a soup. You pretend interest, but you are busy trying to understand how the world manages to be so big and so empty at the same time. One of them asks where you are going. You reply that you don't know for sure, and for the first time in the day, someone believes you. Further ahead, the road crosses a steep hill. The horse pulls with effort and the cart groans, as if remembering all the wrong decisions that brought you here. One of the pilgrims gets down to help, but ends up slipping and falling on his back in the mud. He gets up laughing, saying it is a divine sign. You just think that destiny must have a very peculiar sense of humor. At the top of the hill, the wind changes, stronger, colder. It blows with intent, kicking up dust and reminding you that there is no cloak sufficient to hold back winter. The landscape ahead is melancholic. Leaf-stripped fields, distant villages, smoke rising from fireplaces that smell of firewood. In practice, it is dry land and little food. You stop for a moment, observing. The horse breathes heavily, the sun descends lazily, and the pilgrims pray softly. Maybe out of gratitude, maybe out of fear. The sound of prayers mixes with the wind, creating a low murmur that helps nothing. And for an instant, the silence weighs more than the fatigue. But soon the enchantment ends. The pilgrim, with the breath of long penance, decides it is time to sing. It is a long, repetitive, and out-of-tune song. The kind of melody that makes time walk slower. You just nod your head in the hope that this counts as participation. The sun begins to vanish and the road darkens. The medieval night arrives quickly, without transition. What was landscape is now shadow. What was road becomes guesswork. You light a lantern whose flame flickers with every sway. The horse hesitates, the pilgrims fall silent, and you feel that familiar shiver, not of fear, but of awareness. The kind of awareness that reminds you that in the middle of nowhere, nobody hears if the wheel breaks. And as if the universe had a sense of timing, the wheel breaks. A dry crack, a thud, and the cart leans to the side with the elegance of an announced tragedy. You jump. The pilgrims scream. The horse tries to flee, and it all ends in silence. That kind of silence only disaster leaves behind. You observe the damage. The wood cracked, the axle bent, and the trip is technically over. One of the pilgrims suggests praying, the other suggests running. You suggest crying, but not in time. The wind increases, the sky darkens, and the cold returns with anger. By luck, or irony, there is a hut a few meters from the road, a crooked construction made of branches and goodwill. You all run to it, taking shelter like someone fleeing a collective punishment. Inside, the smell of old smoke and wet cloth. No living soul, or none visible. A fire is lit, the cart forgotten, and the group settles on the dirt floor. The pilgrims start praying again, faster now, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of fear. You just watch the shadows dancing on the walls and think, all this to walk half a dozen leagues. While the fire crackles, the exhaustion returns. But not the kind of exhaustion sleep resolves. It's that end-of-shift exhaustion, knowing that tomorrow is just more road, more uncertainty, and perhaps less wheel. And yet, you know you will continue, because in the Middle Ages, quitting wasn't an option. It was just another way to die. As if the broken wheel and the biting cold weren't enough, the hut where you've stuffed yourselves for the night reveals, in the weak light of the embers, an unexpected treasure. Treasure is a figure of speech. They are pieces of twisted iron, a hammer with a loose handle, and a rope that has seen more knots than a saint sees promises. Still, it is what exists between you and the privilege of living forever in the middle of nowhere. Then the triage begins. What works, what cuts your hand, and what cuts your hand while pretending to help. The pilgrims propose a prayer before the repair. You accept, Because asking for a miracle is faster than learning carpentry from scratch under a crosswind. One makes the sign of the cross, the other looks for a psalm, and you look for a straighter branch to improvise a wheel spoke. Irony of the day. The only minimally decent wood was used for the hut door. A door that doesn't close right. It's always like this. What works is in the wrong place. What you need is missing, and what's left is what will break first. Medieval humor calls this tradition. You disassemble the rim with the care of someone handling bones. The axle, of course, bent. Nothing grave. Grave is having no way to straighten it. One of the pilgrims suggests heating the iron to align it. Great. If the fire in the hut were more than shy, you feed the flame with damp branches, old cloth, and good faith. The iron heats enough to burn a finger, but not enough to straighten out. It is the perfect metaphor for the trip. Demands effort, delivers little. Still, with short hammer blows and the patience that only those with no alternative can find, you reduce the deformity. For the spokes, improvisation. Splinters from a beam of the cart itself, cut with a pocket knife, sanded with rough stone, unequal sufficient. The alignment, not so much. It depends on Providence cooperating. Yes, the horse watches the operation with his usual face, philosophical boredom of someone who knows he will pull the final invention, good or bad, at the same pace. He is the employee of the month for misfortune. Then comes the grease part for the axle. Grease. There is none. There is tallow in a tied sack, smelly in the worst sense. It works. You melt the tallow in a clay bowl, mix in a little ash to thicken it, and smear it on the axle with the devotion of someone anointing a king. It isn't science, it's technical superstition. If it glides, you pretend that was the plan. And if it doesn't glide, you can always blame the weather or the fiefdom, made for each other. Before putting the wheel back, the first extra of the day appears. A skinny fellow, hood low, comes from the woods offering help in exchange for a contribution. It's that kind of volunteering that accepts coins, bread, or the horse itself. A more creative interpretation of the term taxpayer. You size up the man, size up the dagger at his waist, size up the courage you don't have. You say you accept the help, provided he accepts the attentive supervision of two pilgrims who look bigger than they are. Today you learn an essential lesson of medieval logistics. Cart repair is also a negotiation of turf. The guy actually understands wheels. He hits, adjusts. He suggests wedging it with a sliver of horn. Horn. He pulls it from his pocket like someone drawing perfume. Says it serves as a wedge and doesn't rot fast. You don't ask where the horn came from. Certain types of information do not improve sleep. The wheel goes in crooked, but obedient. In a half-turn test, it sings less than before. For the first time, something seems to improve. Spoiler, it's an impression. Further ahead, when you resume the road, another category of difficulty arises, which isn't mud, isn't smell, but walking bureaucracy. A small bridge post, half a dozen planks over a stream, charges a tax per axle, per animal, and depending on the mood, per breath. Toll for the crossing, says the collector with that technical smile of someone who found the only place in the world where a piece of wood is worth more than your dignity. You explain you are fixing the wheel. He replies, then the maintenance fee applies. Does it make sense? 0. Is it medieval? Completely. With a coin, you pay the minimum possible. In exchange, you receive a piece of wood with a hot brand, proof of payment that must be returned at the end of the bridge. Foolproof logic, except for the detail that whoever loses the brand returns to the start. At the end of the bridge, the collector is sleeping. The brand falls from your hand. The pilgrim picks it up. The collector's dog barks as if it were a trained wolf. It is a small sequence of errors upon errors. You pass without glory, without dignity, with a stamp. The road continues and brings the category measures that don't match. The sack of oats that was worth a bushel in the neighboring village is now worth 3-4 here. Not because the sack changed, but because the standard of whoever measures changed. Every village has its ruler, every market has its arithmetic. You argue, the seller points to the local lord's banner, and you understand. Arguing with a flag results in a fine in the form of humiliation. You buy what you can, swallow your pride, keep the rest to chew, literally, later. Your feet begin to complain as much as the axle. Another unpoetic difficulty, worn soles. Walking beside the cart, climbing hills to relieve the animal, wears down leather and patience. Patching. Take a piece of the tying strap, nail it with splinters. Comfort does not exist. The goal is to prevent the toe from seeing the world. In the Middle Ages, seeing your toe through your shoe is a sign of trouble and a short future. And then there is the map in your head. Asking for directions is a risky sport. A shepherd points that way using his whole arm. A woodcutter says, "Where the sun lies down," partially useful information depending on the time. An old woman says to avoid the woods because of spirits. You translate that as people with knives and skirt a valley only to fall into a medieval traffic jam, a village fair. Fairs are great for selling, terrible for passing through. Too many people, too much shouting, too many feudal inspectors wanting to participate in your non-existent profit. You force open a space. Meanwhile, a chicken decides to climb onto the cart and claim property. Sometimes the local law is exactly that. The first one to shout keeps the chicken. In the middle of the fair, an official with a feather in his hat asks for a safe conduct paper. You shrug. Peasant with paper? Since when? He licks his finger, turns pages of nothing, and charges the fine for lack of seal. The seal is imaginary. The fine is real. You pay a small coin and a larger one in the form of a glare. Glares, however, do not count in the coffers. The afternoon advances, and the trip drags on in the gentle gear of exhaustion. The heated axle relieves the noise a little until a thin whistle begins, rope scraping on the rim edge. You improvise a twisted fiber belt, loop the spokes, tie it with a knot you learned watching a boy tie a goat. It works for half a league. Time enough for the knot to become a personal legend and then turn into nothing. The rope snaps, the A note returns to sing, and you learn one more thing. A good repair is one that lasts until the next problem. As if that weren't enough, comes the valley crossing. Not a bridge, a river ford with slippery stones. The freezing water takes away your support, and that's it. You enter guiding the horse, holding the wheel to not let the current take you sideways, and feel the force of the water pushing past decisions against your shin. In the middle, a treacherous stone traps the animal's foot. He whinnies, tries to climb, and drops half the cart at an angle that would make a carpenter cry. The pilgrims jump, push, pray, and you manage to free the hoof with a branch lever. The cart leaves limping, and so do you. Worse than the river is only the sensation that night will arrive before the next village. And it arrives slender, sudden, without kindness. The lantern illuminates what it can, more shadow than ground. Every so often a snap in the brush. Wolf, fox, people. Your ear chooses the worst option. You stick with the branch rubbing against branch theory because feeling fear requires energy, and you have already spent it all. The trip demands mental accounting. How much candle is left? How much oats for the horse? How much will for you? In the pitch black, a monastery appears like a mirage. Low wall, bell, a late light. Knocking on the gate is asking for lodging without paying. Christian hospitality, they say. It happens that hospitality has a queue. The brother porter opens a crack, examines you with measuring eyes and asks, from where? To where? Why? Short answers work better than long truths. You enter the courtyard. The cart stays outside. Cloister rules. No wheels scratching sacred stone. Patience is free, but comes with a manual. The monastic meal is silent and lukewarm. Clear soup, bread that doesn't hurt, a sip of beer that looks like interested water. It isn't a banquet, it's a truce. The reader brother chants lives of saints while you chant the life of your coccyx in telepathy. Nobody complains. Everyone has their cross. Yours is with an axle. In the monastery hostel, conversation is low, straw is dry, certified miracle. And the bed has a wooden pillow. It is surprising how much this already counts as luxury. Before blowing out the candle, a monk asks if he can write your names in a book. Book with names. Some would call it control. Today, you call it memory. If tomorrow goes wrong, someone will know your cart existed. It is little, but it is more than the bridge charged. And there is still the administration of the next day. The blacksmith brother says he can straighten the axle when the main bell rings nuns, which in practice means when I want to. He asks in exchange not money, but work. Help pull bellows, carry firewood, pick up dropped nails. Nails are poor man's gold. Lose easily, you accept. Trade time for tools, sweat for metal. Medieval economy, honest version. Under the blacksmith's hammer, the axle sings another tone. The iron reddens, the anvil returns a dry blow, and the wheel finally fits without groaning. It isn't perfect, it is round enough to roll. In celebration, the monk offers half an extra candle for departure. Small generosity makes a big difference when the world is dark. When the gate opens again and the cart rolls onto the road, there is a rare sensation. Advance, not much, not fast, but more than stopped. The horse feels it, steps more firmly. The pilgrims wave to the monks. Someone smiles. It might have been you, and the trip that insisted on calling itself punishment gains an air of task accomplished for 5 steps at least. Then comes the climb, gravel, unfair charge, wrong measure, twisted wind, and whatever else the Middle Ages wants. But in this short interval, the wheel spins without singing, and that here is acceptable silence. The day dawns with an indecisive sun, the kind that seems to want to warm up, but only serves to leave the air more stifling. The cart creaks, the horse just chews, and you follow the wide road that they say leads to a market. They say, because nobody ever confirms anything with certainty. Medieval people are specialists in giving wrong directions with conviction. You go, because going is what remains. Staying solves nothing. Walking might solve something. Hope is the cheapest fuel available, and also the one that evaporates the most. The market appears around the curve, a confusion of stalls, shouts, and smoke. The air is heavy but alive. Smell of fat, iron, leather, and lies. People of all kinds push each other, give dirty looks, and try to pretend they know what they are doing. It is the commercial center of chaos. You park the cart between a salt cellar and a chicken cellar, both with the same expression. If I don't sell, I steal. And if I sell, maybe I steal too. You bring in the cart some tools, a sack of oats, and some old pans. Nothing that impresses, but enough to attract the curious. A man with a crooked moustache and a malicious smile approaches, looks at your goods and says, "Hard to sell today, friend. Too much supply, too little faith." You laugh, half without understanding, half out of social reflex. He offers to buy everything for half the price, claiming the fair taxes are high. You look around, searching for the tax collector. There isn't one, just him. Negotiating is an art, and you clearly are not an artist. He speaks fast, weighs the sack, pretends to measure, and hands you coins with the suspicious shine of those that have shone more brightly before. When you realize the metal is too light, he has already disappeared into the crowd. The first lesson of the market is simple. Everyone seems honest until the first exchange of coins. While thinking about the stupidity you just committed, a preacher climbs onto a crate and starts shouting about the end of times. The audience gathers, curious. He promises a cure for pain, forgiveness for debt, and protection against plagues, all for a symbolic price. Of course. A small flask, yellowish liquid, supposedly blessed by a saint with a difficult name. You think that at least the flask is pretty. and immediately after think that this is exactly what he wants you to think. The stalls multiply. Prices confuse themselves. On one corner, they sell salt at the price of gold. On the other, gold at the price of salt, or at least it seems so. A man swears that the coin from the neighboring county is worth less because the feudal lord there is depraved. You find it funny that in the Middle Ages, even the value of money depended on the owner's morals. It is the kind of economy that only works if nobody understands, and since nobody understands, it works perfectly. Further ahead, you try to trade one of your pans for fabric. The woman at the counter looks, turns it over, hits the bottom, and says it is bent. You reply that her cloth isn't straight either. She retorts, but the cloth folds, the pan does not. You lose the argument, the cloth, and a bit of dignity. At noon, the market heats up. The noise becomes one, a constant buzz of voices and hammers. The cart starts to bother the other merchants, and you are gently invited to move. You move without knowing where to. The horse seems to understand the confusion better than you, dodging people and holes as if he had his own map. Every meter someone offers something absurd. Half a used candle, but with a blessing. Dead man's boots, still firm. Half a sheep for a whole price. You stop in a corner and try to eat a piece of bread. The taste is the same as always, tired wheat and resignation. While chewing, you watch a group of children trying to steal fruit from a stall. The owner pretends not to see. He will probably charge the next customers. It is the virtuous circle of authorized theft. But the noise changes. A rhythmic metallic sound, small hurried bells. Someone shouts, "Rain!" and suddenly everyone moves. The sky, hitherto indecisive, collapses without warning. People run, stalls collapse, and the market turns into an improv spectacle. You try to cover the cart with the cloth, but it is smaller than it looks. The horse stops, looking at you like someone saying, "I told you so." The water falls thick, heavy, turning the ground into a puddle and conversation into shouting. In a few minutes, the market dissolves. Half flee, half try to sell canvas. You run to a nearby barn, a simple wooden construction, doors open and smelling of dry straw. There are already people inside. Of course, there are always people. A broad-shouldered blacksmith, a skinny merchant, and a woman with a baby in her lap divide the space, each trying to pretend they don't see the other. You lean in a corner, the horse flicks his ears, and silence sets in. The blacksmith comments that the road back was blocked by a flood. The merchant says it's a lie just to sell shelter. The woman says nothing, just looks at her son sleeping with that kind of exhaustion that not even rain erases. The water drips from the roof in rhythmic intervals, as if time had turned liquid. The sound is almost hypnotic. Nobody talks much. People in the Middle Ages had the rare talent of speaking little and thinking too much, the opposite of what would come centuries later. You think about the trip, the bent axle, the sack of oats you lost, the fake coins in your pocket, and realize that even quiet, the world continues stealing from you little by little. Outside, thunder tears the sky. Inside, the blacksmith starts sharpening a knife just to pass the time. The noise of metal on metal is irritating and at the same time reassuring. It is the sound of someone who still believes things can be fixed, even if they are no good anymore. The merchant opens a small barrel and offers a sip of something that smells like vinegar and courage. You accept. It burns, but warms. He laughs, says it is wine from the banks of the Loire. You doubt it. Loire must be the name of the bucket. Even so, you thank him. In the Middle Ages, any liquid that doesn't kill you immediately is already a luxury. The storm delays, the roof groans, the wind passes through the cracks, and night arrives without ceremony. The improvised fire in the center of the barn casts shadows on the walls, each one more crooked than the last. The baby wakes up and cries. The sound echoes as a reminder that life still exists outside resignation. You watch and think that of everyone there, The only truly sensible one is the horse. He sleeps standing up without worrying about any of this. When the rain finally ceases, the smell of wet wood and contained conversation remains. Nobody wants to leave first. Whoever leaves first always takes the bad luck that got stuck in the air. You wait for the blacksmith to get up, and he waits for the merchant. The woman is the first to go. The baby didn't choose, just follows. You decide to follow too. The cart is heavy again, now with dry mud stuck to the wheels and a feeling difficult to name. Exhaustion, perhaps, or that kind of melancholy you get when you realize your whole life fits inside a cart and still seems too big to push. The sky clears, revealing stars. They blink high above, distant, as if mocking those who still insist on walking down below. You think about laughing, but only sigh. The trip continues slow, uncertain, and strangely infinite. The road calls you again, not with promises, but with the simple fact of existing. You get as far as pointing the wheel in the right direction and think about leaving, but the sky decides it's in charge. The wind changes sides. The clouds return like creditors, and the first gust returns the canvas into the cart with the elegance of a slap. It is night before schedule. It is not a metaphor. The darkness falls completely without negotiation. The barn, which seemed like a temporary option, becomes the official address. Your freedom now has a rotted wooden roof and walls with more holes than a debt collector's excuse. Inside, the air has another rule. Nobody asks anything directly. People size each other up by the weight of the look, by the sound of the step, by the way they touch their own sack of supplies. Who knows, survives? Who trusts, shares their own purse with the first curious person who comes to help open it? You learn fast. You sit with your back to a beam, the cart diagonally blocking the door, the horse tied short, and the rest of the world outside. For now, trusting here is the fastest way to end up with nothing. The blacksmith looks at your wheels, like someone seeing a patient in terminal condition. Comments without asking permission that wood swollen from rain loosens the rim. Tomorrow, if you hurry, the wheel might shrink and drop a spoke. The solution: beat a hot iron ring, or at least soak the wood again and bind it with hemp rope. The woman with the child places the little one on top of an overturned saddle. The saddle becomes a cradle, the leather becomes a blanket, the blanket becomes a triumph. The baby sleeps with the ease of someone who hasn't understood the world yet. Lucky him. You hand over, without thinking much, a piece of bread. She thanks you with what adults of the Middle Ages offer when they cannot repay. A God pay you, said softly, the kind that promises nothing but relieves. The merchant opens his cloak, reveals flasks that clink, and smiles with that confidence only a capped flask gives. Sells balm that, according to him, cures bone pain, scares away bad thoughts, and as a bonus, attracts luck. You ask if it attracts coins. He says that depends on the buyer's faith, miracle with manual included. The rain thickens, changes sound, becomes a drum. The roof responds with disciplined dripping. The blacksmith grabs a bucket, the woman positions a tub. You improvise a funnel with a crooked hat. In minutes, there is a choreography of drops, each with its container, each with its music. The horse listens and relaxes. You do not. At any louder snap, everyone looks up as if they could hold the ceiling with their eyes. Peasant intuition does not predict lightning, but recognizes tired wood. The conversation comes in short waves. Nobody piles up too many phrases. It is less out of shyness and more out of economy. Words like firewood have to last the night. The blacksmith comments on the bridge that took half the planks. The woman speaks of tax collectors changing the measure of wheat at every fair. The merchant swears that in this region, copper coins were debased and now are worth a third. Not because they weigh less, but because the local lord decided they weigh less. Fear circulates like a draft. It isn't fear of monsters, it is fear of people. A sound outside, branches, wind, who knows, footsteps. The blacksmith reaches for the hammer and you adjust your short knife like someone adjusting an idea. Being robbed when you have nothing of value is almost a philosophical insult. The merchant proposes rotating watches. Nobody disagrees. Shifts of napping, shifts of listening. Democracy of bad sleep. Between one gust and another, an old man arrives, dripping wet. Doesn't knock, just slides through the crack. Asks for shelter with the face of someone who has heard no all night. Brings a bundle of tied herbs, says that in exchange he can scare away miasmas by burning a handful in the embers. The blacksmith rolls his eyes. The merchant negotiates a price. The woman just wants the boy not to wake up. You think if it doesn't scare away disease, at least it perfumes the despair. They authorize it. The old man scatters herbs in the fire. The smell rises. Resin, mint, more polite smoke. If it cures anything, nobody knows, but it alters the atmosphere, and that is already treatment. The horse complains about the short halter. You loosen a hole, measure the distance to the door, decide on a middle ground between breathing and escaping. Animal in collective shelter has protocol, space enough not to kick, short enough not to become owner of the barn. While adjusting, you realize another subtlety of the trip nobody told you. Caring for the hoof is as important as caring for the wheel. Loose stone, crooked step, hoof fever, and the trip becomes a story told by someone else. The more talkative merchant unravels road tricks, says never to keep everything in the same sack unless you want to hand over everything at once. Suggests hiding 2 coins in a corner of your clothing, sewing another inside the collar, and keeping the poor ones, those for market circulation, in a noisy purse. Thieves like the sound of wealth. You offer noise and deliver crumbs. It is a theater and the audience is hungry people. The blacksmith asks to see the wheel at dawn, but already advises, if the rain continues, don't force it on slopes. On the exit from mud, the spoke cracks. It is a phrase as technical as it is pastoral. You nod, half science, half legend, all experience of someone who saw wood get tired and people too. The storm takes a short breath. The pause is treacherous, makes everyone think of leaving at the same time, and nobody wants to be the first to cross the dark. The old man with the herbs takes the opportunity to approach you, offers a handful of dry bread, wants nothing in exchange. You almost ask the price out of habit. He shakes his head like someone remembering times when giving wasn't a crime. Kindness still exists. It just became rare enough to seem like contraband. A rat crosses the hay with the tranquility of someone paying rent in grain. The horse moves his head away, the woman pulls the boy close, the merchant lifts his feet, the blacksmith laughs. If they are around, the barn is good. It is medieval logic. Where there is a rat, there is stock. Where there is storage, nobody goes hungry today. Tomorrow, tomorrow's problem. The night advances on the firewood clock. 1 bundle less, 1 conversation less. Sleep comes in installments without patience interest. You take off your coat, fold it badly, and transform it into a pillow that doesn't deserve the name. You don't restart any scene, just continue sitting now. A little lower, a little closer to the ground, as if gravity had opinions. The merchant naps with his hand in his pocket. The blacksmith sleeps with the hammer on his belly. The woman rests her eyes, but not her ears. The old man with the herbs prays without drawing the attention of saints. Outside, the storm changes instrument and becomes wind. The barn groans. The planks sing. The door gives 2 dry knocks like a polite debt collector. Nobody gets up. At this height, getting up is a promise the body does not keep. You run your hand in your pocket, where you kept the worst coins, and realize that the greatest wealth of the moment is the axle not groaning. In poverty, wealth is the cart not squeaking. It is in this core of the night, neither early nor late, that paranoia does the math. You review what you have, what is missing, what you need to sell, what you will negotiate out of shame. You think of the village where you left, and the exact reason for this trip, which now seems imprecise. Maybe it was necessity, maybe a tired idea of seeing the world. The world, for now, is this: a barn full of strange people who behave better than many known people. The blacksmith wakes up and in a quick gesture revives the ember, like someone remembering that fire doesn't sleep alone. He speaks softly. "If you want, tomorrow in the light, I'll help wedge the wheel with cold iron and rope. Better than waiting for a miracle." You agree. Miracles have fees, ropes, at least we understand, taking advantage of the fact that you arrived here and still haven't slept with the symphony of wood, rain, and devalued coins. Do a favor for the tired narrator. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you are listening from and what time it is. Help this video cross the algorithm without a toll. And if you have already dozed off and woken up in the middle, tell me that too. When the dawn cools to the point of taking away will, the storm gives up first. The noise turns into isolated drops. The wind changes subject, and through the crack appears a beginning of clarity that doesn't warm, but promises. The blacksmith gets up, stretches the world out of his back, and is already outside before anyone decides. The woman wraps the boy. The merchant runs to see if the flask survived. You call the horse with that sound the animal recognizes and trusts. It is a sincere connection, one of the few of the trip. The dawn inspection is crueler than the night's. The wheel is swollen, the rim loose, the axle with new marks. The blacksmith grabs a leather strip, a hemp rope, and suggests a cross tie, alternating tension. Barrel knot. You help. The old man with herbs blows dry ash to dry moisture in the joint seat. The merchant offers a trickle of pure oil that you suspect is anything but pure. It works for now, and for now is the official unit of time for those who travel without a calendar. Before leaving, the woman hands you back a piece of the bread that was left over. You refuse? She insists, so the road doesn't complain. The blacksmith gives 2 taps on the wheel and smiles shortly. The old man with herbs offers you a sprig tied with string against the bad night. The merchant wants to sell 1 more flask. You say you will buy later. Medieval expression for maybe never. He understands. It is a language. When you pull the rein and make the cart move, there is that second of suspense. The wheel turns. The axle speaks softly, the horse accepts, the barn is left behind with its collection of drips, its implicit pacts, and the memory that for a few hours nobody charged you anything you couldn't pay. It is almost luxury. The road restarts without fanfare, the same way as always, with a little noise you pretend not to hear, and a determination you don't know where it came from. And as if the world wanted to test your mood, the first intersection has no sign, only footprints. Choose is this, a science drawn in the mud. The road follows inside a thick forest, the kind of path that seems more made to hide than to arrive. The sunlight enters in wisps between the leaves, and the sound of wheels turns almost to a whisper. The horse walks slowly, attentive, as if he also knew that nobody sensible crosses here without having a good reason, or none. You pull the reins carefully, neither fast enough to attract attention, nor slow enough to become an easy target. In the middle of the Middle Ages, subtlety is a matter of survival. The trees are tall, dense, and the air smells of moss and suspicion. Every so often, the silence is broken by a branch snapping, the kind of sound that reminds you that you exist. You try to convince yourself it is just wind or a squirrel or a wind very talented at imitating footsteps. In the bush, only the wind seems to follow you. And maybe something with teeth, nothing a good silence won't solve. That is the travel philosophy you chose. Trust in luck and hope not to be wrong. The terrain changes, the ground becomes irregular, covered with roots and hidden stones. The cart rocks, The axle protests. You get down to relieve the weight on the climbs, pushing the wheel like someone pushing their own fate. The horse pulls, grumbles, and every so often casts that look only an exhausted animal can give. Half pity, half judgment. You swear he sighs when he realizes the climb isn't over yet. Further ahead, the sound of the forest changes tone. The birds stop singing. The wind holds its breath. You don't know the reason, but you learn quickly that on the medieval road, silence is the noise of trouble. And as if the world had a sense of timing, two men appear in the middle of the path. One holds a crooked spear, the other a face of someone who thinks authority is a profession. "Count, stop," says the one with the spear. "Crossing tacks." You observe the two, the worn clothes, the shield with a symbol painted by hand, and think, if this is the Count, the fiefdom is doing poorly. You explain you are just a peasant with an old cart and a tired horse. The man pretends to listen, but already extends his hand. "Tax is tax," he says. You search in your pocket, pretend to hesitate, take out 2 small coins, the ones worth least even in your village. He looks, pretends to weigh with his hand, and shakes his head. Little. Price went up. Of course it went up. Everything in the Middle Ages goes up except the standard of living. You try to argue, but the second man, the one with the authority face, already takes a step forward and examines the cart. He pokes the sack of oats, looks at the pans, rummages through ropes, picks one up, smells it and says, "Carrying valuable goods." You laugh. A mistake. Humor and tension are terrible companions. He doesn't find it funny. Mocking the law? He asks with the confidence typical of someone who just invented a law. You reply no, that you just found curious what he calls valuable goods. He thinks a little and decides sarcasm costs extra. "One more coin," he says, opening his hand. You pay not out of respect, but because arguing with someone who has a spear and self-esteem never ended well in any era. They walk away slowly, leaving the uncomfortable feeling that the tax will repeat on the way back. The forest continues and the day begins to weigh. The exhaustion isn't physical, it is psychological. On the medieval road, you don't fear the unknown, you fear the repeated. Every curve can hide another collector, another pretext, another injustice with a coat of arms. The path is long, and you no longer know if you're going somewhere or just fleeing monotony. In the afternoon, the wind changes, brings the smell of smoke. You quicken your pace and soon see the reason. An overturned cart on the side of the road. Broken wood, pieces of fabric, a wheel still turning slowly. The horse is gone. Footprints indicate dragging. You look for a moment and think about helping, but there is no one to help. Just the void and the echo of what happened there a little while ago. Clear sign, the bandits are still nearby, and 2 curves later, a stone in the middle of the road, big, heavy, strategically placed. You stop. It is the kind of obstacle that screams trap in all languages. The horse smells the air impatiently. You get down, examine the ground, fresh boot marks, feel your heart tighten. There is no good option. Retreating is calling attention. Following is provocation. You choose the cowardly middle ground, feign calm and push the stone aside. That is when the first one appears, comes out of the bush with torn clothes and a bow in his hand. Then comes another and another. 3 in total. The one with the bow speaks. "Good afternoon, traveler. Late, isn't it, to walk alone around here?" You think about answering. "I'm not alone, I have the horse," but decide that humor might kill. The man smiles that toothless way that indicates danger. "Leave what you have of value and go in peace," he says. Peace is an expensive concept. You explain you have nothing beyond what was already stolen by life. They laugh, but one of them climbs onto the cart. He rummages through the sack of oats, finds an iron spoon, and says it will serve. Iron is iron. The other takes a piece of cloth, and the third examines the horse with a butcher's look. You step forward. "The horse, no, he's all I have." The one with the bow thinks, scratches his chin, and in an unexpected gesture nods. All right, but leave the oats. Deal closed. You hand over the sack, they disappear into the bush, and the road returns to normal, which is the same as saying uncomfortable and unpredictable. You sigh, relieved and humiliated. It is the kind of victory only poverty understands. With lighter weight and shorter spirits, you continue. The sun already begins to fall, and the shadows of the trees elongate the path. The sound of insects increases, creating a dissonant symphony of buzzes and clicks. The world contracts around you. And then comes the wind, cold, cutting, strange. Not the natural wind of dusk, but one that seems to breathe with you. For an instant, the horse stops and pricks his ears. You hear absolute silence, neither bird nor leaf. Only the light sound of something moving among the bushes. A dry noise, steps or paws you can't see. You grab the short knife more to have something to fool yourself with than to defend yourself. Suddenly, the sound stops, and it is worse. Fear in the Middle Ages didn't come from what was seen, but from what the bush hid. You keep walking, feigning naturalness, because even terror has etiquette. And then there was a low growl, distant, guttural. The horse freezes, your heart too. You don't wait to find out if it is a wolf, boar, or just the echo of your own paranoia. You let out a dry go and pull the rein. The cart responds, the axle creaks, and the sound of hooves covers the rest. By luck or miracle, no one appears. The forest fades behind, the wind returns to blow normal, and the world resumes rhythm. In the next clearing, the sky has already darkened. You find a small abandoned wooden shelter, perhaps used by woodcutters. You try to light a lantern, but the wick is short and the flame dies easily. You sit on the ground, leaning against the wheel, body still alert. The horse chews a tuft of grass, calm, indifferent. And it is in this contrast between human panic and animal serenity that you realize. Maybe the secret to survival is simply not thinking too much. The cold descends slowly, like a reminder that the day was too long. You adjust your cloak, close your eyes, but the sound of the forest doesn't let you forget that the world outside doesn't sleep. The cart seems safe. The horse breathes constantly and fear settles. It doesn't go away. It just learns to stay silent. The night barely ended when you spot in the distance a cluster of low roofs and smoke rising in a spiral. A small village, crooked but alive, or at least it seems so. After days on the road, any set of roofs already looks like civilization. The horse pulls slowly, wheels creaking in the cadence of someone who unlearned what rest is, and you feel a shred of relief, the kind of hope that dies of fright when it gets close to people. The entrance to the village is marked by a wooden arch and a carved cross. Apparently, divine protection also has a local signature. Two children play on the ground but flee as soon as they see you. The first reaction of a medieval village to a stranger is always the same. Pretend they didn't see, and then close doors. It is an ancient and quite effective technique. You follow, trying to look less threatening than you actually look. Stubble, clothes dirty from travel, tired eyes, and a cart with the elegance of a wardrobe falling to pieces. It is the classic look of someone nobody wants around. And the village gets the message. Doors close, windows slam, even the dog looks suspicious. In the central square, a euphemism for a mud clearing, there is a well and a small chapel. You think about getting water, but an old man appears out of nowhere as if he sprouted from the ground. He holds a wooden stick and looks at you with trained mistrust. "From where do you come?" he asks. The sincere answer, "From far away," seems not to please. He shakes his head, takes a step back and spits to the side. Diplomatic sign that you are not welcome, but not yet a criminal. You try to explain that you only need a corner to spend the night. Maybe sell some tools, trade for food. The man scratches his beard, thinks, and replies, "Here we don't host strangers. We already had plague, and the priest said travelers bring disease." The phrase is said with the naturalness of someone announcing the weather. Plague is as common as rain. When it arrives, one can only wait for it to pass. The name plague hangs in the air like solid superstition. People believe in it so much that fear already does half the work. You look around. Some houses have symbols painted on the doors, a mixture of crosses and eyes drawn with lime. It is the kind of art that screams, "Nobody enters without dying." You decide it is best not to insist. But the horse needs shelter, and you need something that doesn't involve sleeping in the open again. You walk a little more and find a stable, old, empty smelling of hay and oblivion. Perfect. The owner appears shortly after. A skinny man, bony face, fast talk. He doesn't ask who you are, only how much you can pay. When you show the coins, he smiles with the teeth that remain. You can stay in the corner, but don't touch the cows. You thank him without asking the reason. In the Middle Ages, some questions aren't curiosity, they are offenses. The corner is tight, the floor cold, and the silence full of imaginary voices. The owner leaves, and you lean against the wheel, body asking for a rest that time doesn't give. Through the crack you see people walking fast, heads down, as if haste could protect from epidemic. Nobody greets each other. Everyone carries the same look, that of someone who survived more than lived. A group of women passes whispering. One of them looks at you, then disguises it, and makes the sign of the cross. The gesture is automatic, like shooing a fly. This is how travelers are treated, a necessary evil with emphasis on the evil. You think about laughing, but the heavy air doesn't permit it. Humor here is an imported item. Later, the sound of a bell cuts the air. People stop, murmur prayers, and go back to walking. The priest comes out of the chapel, a thin and bent figure, with an expression mixing boredom and authority. He sees you and comes in your direction. You prepare for another question about origin, destination, or motive, but he only asks, "Did you pay the entrance tax?" You say you didn't know it existed. He smiles without surprise. Everything that exists because someone pays. You hand over the last good coin. He waits with the delicacy of someone holding a host, then points to the ground. "Sleep there near the wall, the wind passes less." It is a blessing disguised as disdain, the most common type. Dusk arrives slowly, painting the houses a sad orange. The village smells of smoke and mistrust. In the stable, the horse eats hay in peace. You chew the rest of the hard bread left over, watching rats pass as if they had a fixed route. The silence is only broken by a crow that insists on landing on the roof and staring at you. Who knows what he expects? A man appears at the door, thin in gravedigger's clothes. Literally, he is the gravedigger. He brings a shovel in his hands, and a serenity only those who deal with the dead possess. "Stranger," he asks. You confirm. "Then welcome. Everyone who arrives already has a guaranteed place here." He laughs dryly and sits down. He is the first to talk to you without trying to charge anything. His humor is darker than the soil he digs, but there is something comforting in it. He talks about life in the village, about how nobody trusts anyone since the last sickness, and about how people bury more fear than people. "And the priest?" you ask. The priest prays for the dead and negotiates with the living. Pastoral efficiency. The conversation ends with the gravedigger wishing you a good night, if the air allows. You thank him, and he disappears into the darkness with the lightness of someone who knows all the shortcuts between the living and the dead. The cold grows, and the wind enters through the cracks, cutting the silence. You cover your shoulders with the cloak and settle in the corner, trying to ignore the distant sound of coughing. In the village, coughing is almost a crime, an involuntary confession. You hold your breath as if that would protect you. Your mind begins to wander, imagining how many times this village has locked itself up like this, every house turning into a small fortress of fear. Outside, the crow remains there motionless like a bored guardian. The indifferent horse sleeps standing up. You close your eyes, but the thought insists. This village is a portrait of the world. Everyone trapped inside their own fence, afraid of who still breathes. And yet there is something human even in fear. A woman passes and leaves a jar of water at the stable door. Says nothing, doesn't look at you, just leaves it there and goes away. Small gesture, almost invisible, but rare enough to seem like a miracle. You drink slowly, feeling your throat burn with contained gratitude. The moon appears cold over the sleeping village. The cross atop the chapel projects a long shadow, crossing the ground and almost touching the cart. You watch and think that maybe the whole world is this. Shadows trying to reach something they never touch. The wind blows one more time, bringing a distant smell of firewood, fear, and survival. And for the first time in days, you feel something resembling peace, not happiness. That would be exaggeration, but peace enough to believe that with luck, the wheel will still turn tomorrow. The day dawns with a sky of indecisive color, neither gray nor blue, just the exact shade of doubt. The village is left behind, small, fearful, and satisfied with its own solitude. The cart follows at a rhythm only stubbornness maintains. The horse walks out of habit, you out of necessity. And both share the same philosophy. Continuing is easier than going back. The path is now solid ground, flanked by dry fields and low stone walls. A light wind blows, bringing the distant sound of bells. It is a sign of a monastery, or, as the peasants call it, the only place where one can find peace, bread, and judgment, in that order. You vaguely remember hearing about a monastery in the region, famous for sheltering travelers in exchange for suggested alms. In short, hospitality with a price list. The road climbs, winding between hills. The sound of bells becomes clearer, which is good. In the Middle Ages, bells served for everything, calling to prayer, warning of fire, announcing plague, and most frequently, marking that one more innocent was fooled by faith and taxes. You ask yourself which of the four it is today. When the monastery finally appears at the top, it looks like a fortress. Thick walls, heavy wooden gate, and a cross erected like a spiritual observation tower. Two monks are at the entrance, wearing habits that have seen better days. One of them holds a book, the other an expression of boredom. You stop the cart, get down, and try to look more devout than tired. "Peace and bread," says the monk without looking much. "Peace and whatever is left over," you answer instinctively. He doesn't find it funny. Monks rarely do. You explain you come from far away, need shelter and perhaps a blessing to continue the journey. The monk with the book notes something without haste and replies with a trained voice, "We accept all pilgrims, provided they collaborate with the needs of the house." An elegant way of saying, pay before faith. You show what you have, 2 smaller coins and a pan. He analyzes the options like a merchant evaluating vegetables. "The pan will serve," he says, and orders you to take the cart inside the courtyard. It is the first time in days you cross a gate without needing to pretend you have more than you do. Inside, the air smells of incense and wet stone. The courtyard is wide, with a well in the center and monks walking in silence, each carrying their own fatigue disguised as serenity. One of them guides you to the stable, where the horse can rest. He speaks little, but gestures enough to make it clear. Here even animals have hierarchy. You observe the monastery and think how curious it is. Outside, the world is hunger and fear. In here, it is discipline and fear. The difference is the rhythm of prayer. An older monk approaches, white beard, firm look, and a rehearsed smile. The kind of expression mixing faith and administration. "Welcome to the house of God. Here the soul purifies and the body rests." He pauses, analyzes your physical state and completes, "In your case, I think we can try both." You thank him, and he offers you a shallow plate of soup. It is thin, but hot. The flavor is generic. but the heat compensates. He watches while you eat, as if every spoonful were a verse. The road is hard, he says, you agree. But it is in hardship that man approaches the divine. You think about answering that if that is true, God must live in a ditch, but decide to keep the comment. After the meal, you are taken to the main hall where prayers happen. Wooden benches, cold walls, and echoes that seem to whisper advice nobody asked for. A monk reads passages in Latin, another rings a small bell. The repetition is almost hypnotic. You close your eyes, not out of faith, but out of exhaustion. The line between prayer and napping is thin, especially when the sermon is long and the body short of patience. The ceremony ended, the monks disperse. The monk with the book reappears, offering small glass vials. Blessed relics, he explains, for protection on the roads. You ask how much they cost, and he smiles, whatever the heart commands. In the Middle Ages, the heart rarely commands little. You hand over the smaller coin. He pretends to find it fair. Upon leaving, an old man sitting near the gate watches you. Simple clothes, face tanned by time, calloused hands. He holds a piece of bread and breaks it in half, extending one half to you. So the road doesn't seem so long. You hesitate. Nobody has offered you anything for free in a long time. You almost ask the price, but he just smiles. Not everything is bought, son. You accept. The bread is dry, but the gesture feeds more than the wheat. There is something rare and deeply human there, a kindness so out of time it almost seems like a script error. He says nothing more, just goes back to looking at the horizon, as if waiting for someone who never comes. You return to the cart feeling a strange type of peace. Not the peace that sleeps, but the one that tires less. The horse chews hay slowly, and the wind brings the distant sound of another bell. Maybe it is prayer, maybe just routine. While preparing everything to continue the trip, a young monk approaches. He is curious, speaks fast, and has more enthusiasm than faith. "Where are you going?" he asks. You answer that you don't know yet. He laughs like someone who understands. Then you are on the right path. Only those with a destination get lost. It is a wisdom that seems too pretty to be practical. You depart. The monastery gate closes behind, and the road returns to being road, long, narrow, indifferent. The clouds move slow, the wind changes side, and the world seems the same. But there is a subtle difference. Now you carry the old man's bread and a blessing bought with a pan, a mixture of faith and survival. Further ahead, you pass a field of tall wheat. The ears sway in the wind, and for an instant, the sound is like applause. You imagine it is the universe laughing at those who insist on walking. And perhaps it is. The cart follows creaking with dignity. The sun hides behind clouds, and the horizon seems distant enough to continue being a promise. Deep down, that is what the road offers, promises disguised as destination. The horse snorts, you sigh, and the world turns slowly, as it always has, since before saints and coins. The sun does not forgive. It hovers high above, motionless like a lazy inspector, watching who tries to cross the world without authorization. The road has lost pity days ago, if it ever had any. The ground is firm but irregular, and every jolt of the cart rips a different sigh from the body. The horse follows with the same resignation as always, and you with the stubbornness of someone who still believes that continuing is easier than stopping. The fever didn't come suddenly. It installed itself with the care of someone intending to stay. First, the heat inside the clothes, then slightly blurred vision. Now everything seems a little more distant than it really is. The wind touches your face, but arrives late. You feel your body heavy, as if you had become part of the cart. Wood, bone, and dust, all mixed. The trip across the plain seems infinite. Dry fields to the left, worn hills to the right, and a horizon that insists on not changing. It is curious how the medieval road manages to be always different and always the same. You look at the sky and think that even the clouds must be bored. The horse seems to agree. He pulls slowly, without haste, perhaps out of solidarity, perhaps out of wisdom. Deep down, the animal has already understood that no haste changes destiny. Sweat burns your eyes and your throat burns. The canteen is almost empty, and the little water remaining tastes of iron and regret. You drink anyway, because the choice is simple. Either swallow the taste or swallow despair. The first is less philosophical. The fever comes and goes like a tide of internal heat. Sometimes you feel your body light, almost floating, and next heavy, dragging every thought along. The world doesn't spin, it pulses. The sound of wheels mixes with the rhythm of the heart, and it is difficult to know what comes from outside and what is delirium. Even so, you continue, because stopping would mean accepting that the body won, and peasant pride is too stubborn for that. At some point on the road, you pass a small group of travelers on foot, 2 men and a woman carrying bundles and hope. They look at you with a mixture of envy and pity. The cart might be old, but it is shelter. You think about offering a ride, but realize you can barely handle yourself. The silence between you is more honest than any invitation. The landscape changes subtly. A distant village, smoke from an oven, smell of burnt bread in the air. A sign of civilization. You think about stopping, buying something, maybe resting, but the body doesn't want rest. It wants an end. The kind of tiredness that isn't resolved by sleeping, only by quitting. And yet you go on. Practical irony. The Middle Ages transformed stubbornness into a transportation system. Further ahead, the path narrows. A stone bridge. It crosses a dry creek, an engineering effort to cross nothing. You pull the reins and stop for a moment. The wind brings brief relief, almost merciful. The sound of cicadas is so loud, it seems like nature's irony. Even the insects work more than you would like. The body heats up inside, but the skin cools down. It is a confusion of senses. Head hurts, stomach protests, and thought fragments into loose sentences that do not complete. The old man's bread, the monastery, the blacksmith's wheel, everything mixes as if the road were inside you now and not the opposite. The horse takes a step sideways and whinnies low. He feels the imbalance before you admit it. You take a deep breath, hold tight to the seat, and let out a dry laugh. The kind of laugh that serves only to remind you there is still a voice. Easy, beast. We are still whole. A white lie, but he seems to accept. The wind changes again, bringing the smell of burnt herbs. You recognize the aroma, the same one the old man in the barn used in the storm. For an instant, you almost believe he is there invisible, whispering a warning. Don't die on the path, it's too much work to bury travelers. It is a crude thought, but comforting. The hours advance, and the world remains the same. The road doesn't hate you. It just doesn't care about you. And that is almost worse. The body complains but obeys. The fever rises but doesn't win. It is a silent dispute between stubbornness and thermometer. With every meter, a small victory. Not falling, not stopping, not disappearing. At a certain moment, the sound of wheels mixes with your own breathing. It is as if the whole world summed itself up to 2 rhythms, the horse's and yours, a trot and a breath, a simple symphony of survival. The sun descends, not to announce the end of the day, but to remind you that time exists. The heat continues, sweat dries before dripping, and the body follows automatic, obedient, almost wise. You realize you no longer think about destiny, only movement. The idea of arriving turned into something abstract, as distant as the stories monks tell about miracles. A miracle, by the way, is this wheel still turning. Suddenly, a sound. Footsteps? No. A distant bell, small, rhythmic. Maybe a village. maybe a monastery, maybe just the wind playing tricks. You don't have the strength to check, nor the will to doubt. The world at this point no longer needs to make sense. It just needs to continue existing until the next bump. And it continues. The horse follows, the wheels turn, and the fever, tired of insisting, begins to retreat. The body still hurts, but it is a living pain, not a mortal one. A reminder that the worst has passed or just changed its name. You inhale deeply. The hot air scratches your throat but fills you. The horizon is still the same, but now it seems closer, as if the world, out of pity or distraction, had decided to let you advance a little more. In the end, that is what remains. A cart, a horse, and a man who doesn't give up for lack of alternative. It is the perfect portrait of the Middle Ages. Everything moves, nobody arrives, but the sound of wheels is proof that somehow life insists. The heat subsides a little, as if the day remembered it exaggerated. It isn't a truce, it is just enough for the head to go back to organizing the world in straight lines. Trail, stone wall, thin shadow. The fever stayed behind like a debt collector without a receipt. Good sign. You feel your feet, feel the seat, feel the weight of the cart, and to your surprise, still feel the will to follow. In the Middle Ages, this already counts as victory. The plain ends in a modest gorge with a path squeezed between rock and bush. The sound changes register, less cicada, more echo. The wheel hits a bump, the axle converses in whispers, and you think the mechanical music of travel has more variations than any psalm. The dry air is the oil of sanity. If you don't slide through it, you get stuck. Right after the passage, a landmark on the ground. 3 stones piled up, the top one with a short diagonal scratch. Have you seen this? Not similar, the same. The scratch crosses the flake like a recognizable scar. Your stomach contracts without asking for an opinion. Either you are repeating the path or someone reuses the same scratch on every landmark. Further ahead, a solitary fig tree with a crooked branch shaped like a fork. The horse turns his head to the side, exactly at the same point as before, like someone greeting an acquaintance. Memory clicks. You passed here maybe yesterday, maybe 2 days ago, maybe always. The Middle Ages has this cheap trick, transforming geography into a loop. You break the cart not to debate metaphysics, but to check for damage. The rear rim is a thread looser. The blacksmith's hemp knots survived, but ask for reinforcement. Rope, hammer, 2 short blows. Solves it for now. For now is the official unit of travel. Lasts less than hope and more than a promise. The obvious hypothesis appears that shortcut in the forest to the wrong side made you curve the route without realizing. Guides. Some carved in trees, others in the heads of those born here. The problem isn't lack of maps, it is excess of versions. The woodcutter said, "Follow the song of the wind." The shepherd pointed where the sun hides. The old man showed where the ground gets light. All correct, all useless at the same time. You decide not to fight the error. If the road wants to be a circle, so be it. Circles also arrive somewhere, even if it is the starting point. And to remove the final doubt, destiny sends a test. 3 silhouettes on the horizon, staffs, sacks on backs, step of someone conversing with their own silence. The pilgrims are the same ones. The one who prayed out of tune still tries a hymn. The one with the worn staff smiles upon seeing the cart. The third, the one with faith in himself, raises his hand in a greeting mixing tiredness and familiarity. They approach, you stop. There is no astonishment, only observation. The world is big, but the road is too small not to cross the same ghosts. "Did the blessing work?" asks the loudmouth singer, pointing to the flask hanging on your belt. "Worked in part," you reply, "the part that cost short laughs." Indeed, they tell of a stretch with a legal toll, this time for real, a gatekeeper with a bell and a logbook. They say they accept coin and ox, but do not accept excuses. You share your own science. Where the bridge has a stamp, the problem is the stamp. Where it doesn't, the problem is the bridge. Applied economy, medieval version. You follow a few meters together in gentle march. Pilgrims like to walk beside carts. They become shadows, but without weight. The one with the staff narrates that ahead in the valley is the fair tomorrow morning. The local rumour mill announces inspectors changing grain measures again. They bring a smaller cup and pray louder. You thank them for the warning. The average faith is invisible. The average inspector is robbable. Separation without drama. They pull toward a roadside shrine. You keep course on the beaten track. And to inaugurate the diversity part of the route, dialect enters the scene. A peasant family comes in the opposite direction. Handcart loaded with cabbages. You ask if the big village is to the south. The man answers something between a chant and a whisper. Zoe stays by the bands of the sunset, but the bridge came down. You pretend to understand, nod and conclude the essential. It will take long. It really does. The bridge came down, turned into a ferry upstream, a thing of wood tied to a trunk, crossing people and cart one at a time, when the current allows. Cues form. The ferryman has a long pole and little patience, charges by the axle, by the animal, and for quietness. New tax. You ask what it is. He answers, to shut up. Complaint calls for innovation. On boarding, another type of detail only the road remembers. The horse's horseshoe worn in the corner, the ferryman points and clicks his tongue. Says that on the other side there is a blacksmith who accepts payment in oats. Great idea, except your oats became tribute in the forest. Even so, you note mentally, if horseshoe comes loose, no wheel saves us. Hierarchy of urgencies, hoof, axle, coccyx, philosophy. On the other side of the river, the terrain changes personality. Trails multiply into veins of gravel, and every fork has two truths. You choose based on what the horse chooses, short shadow and firm ground. If the beast doesn't want to go, there is a reason. It is the kind of reliability no map delivers. Then arrives the big village. More people, more stalls, more rules. A man, feather in hat, inspects weights at the market, swapping counterweight stones with the subtlety of a magician. You take a pan to trade for bread. They weigh the pan with stone A and give you bread with stone B. Devotional mathematics. Miracle of the multiplication of losses. You bite without taste and without novelty. Further ahead, an announcement nailed to the wellboard. Call for corvée for road repair. Whoever doesn't show up pays. Whoever shows up also pays in exhaustion and calluses. It is brilliant how the fiefdom discovered the modern theory of participation. Everyone included, nobody benefited. You wonder if the Count calls this community. Probably. You pass without parking the cart in the center. A poorly paid guard loves to book strangers for any reason. Dirty wheel, unruly animal, tired face. There are different jurisdictions at every bell. On one side, the abbot rules. On the other, the bailiff rules it to be more expensive. The diversity of the road isn't the landscape, it is the quantity of owners of the same ground. On the exit, a sequence of distant houses and walled gardens. Boys throw pebbles and run after the dust. An old woman locks the gate when you pass, not out of fear of you, but out of respect for custom. Locking is prayer. The wheel returns to emitting a thin whistle. You pull over in the first patch of shade, review the wedges, tense ropes, well-tied knot, sliver of horn in the right place. The present from the suspicious helper days ago remains heroic. 2 blows, a breath. You learn that caring for the wheel is half the work. The other half is accepting that the same wheel will always come back to ask for more. The valley extends in a strip of wheat, and the wind passes like a comb. For a moment, the noise resembles applause from very polite people. Not for you, for nothing in particular. The world sometimes applauds the void. It is poetic and useless in equal measure. At the top of the hill, you spot in the distance a square tower with simple crowning. You would swear it is the same tower you saw at the beginning of the trip, but now from another angle. The sensation is uncomfortable. Displacement exists, the landscape confirms it, but the general drawing signs the same name. It is as if the whole of Europe were the same village multiplied. And again the human detail pulls you back. A woman on the side of the path waves, arms carrying baskets, direct look. Asks to tie a bundle on the back of the cart for half a league ahead until the curve of the ash tree. In exchange, leaves 2 eggs. You agree. Cooperating isn't virtue, it is economy of effort. At the end of the half league, she thanks with a God watch your path that has no tax. Small, honest transactions exist, discreet, like someone passing through the inspection of misery. The hours advance without generating climax. The diversity of the journey appears in tiny scales. Crosswind pushing the canvas like a crooked sail. Trail with black stones heating the hoof more than they should. Loose dogs barking at the cart as if barking were a tax. All small, all added up. The hero of the songs wouldn't survive a week of this, not for lack of a sword, but for lack of patience. In the middle of so much repetition with variation, one finally understands the secret rule. Nobody travels to arrive. One travels to keep life in circulation, like blood that cannot stop or it rots. The wheels are veins, the road is the system. Romantic, not even close, just organic. When the afternoon softens, it isn't an invitation to sleep, it is an invitation to decide. Follow by the dry ridge, with wind in favor and hard ground, or descend to the valley with water, people, suspicious measures and invented taxes. The horse tilts his snout to the ridge. You obey. He is sufficiently trained to recognize good advice when it comes without words. At the top, the view opens. The square tower from afar reveals another in the background and a thread of path that seems promising and therefore doubtful. You let out air slowly, feel the cart align, and let the constant noise of wheels do what it always did. Speak for you. If tomorrow they discover this route was a circle, problem of the drawing. You walked. The difference between going and rotating is a subject for those with maps. The wheel turns, the hoof beats, and that is enough. And for the first time in the entire course, the word return didn't sound like defeat. It sounded like method. The path opens before you, as if the world finally gave up on being difficult. The road descends gently, the wind blows over the plains, and the dust settles. No obstacle, no treacherous curve, no monk wanting coins in exchange for blessing, only silence and ground. The cart, accustomed to suffering, seems to find the relief strange. Even the horse walks lighter, as if suspecting that peace is a trap. The village ahead isn't beautiful or different. Stone houses, uneven roofs, smoke coming out of chimneys, the same smell of firewood and exhaustion. But there is a strange calm there, the kind that comes from those who have nothing more to lose. The cart follows slowly along the entrance trail, wheels sinking a little in dry clay, the sound of wood and iron marking the step of the day. No bell rings, no guard watches, only the daily routine, this silent miracle nobody notices. People pass in a hurry, not out of fear, but out of custom. Everyone seems to carry the same invisible weight, the same haste without destination. Medieval life is an inventory of small obligations. Grind, pray, pay, repeat. The world turns and nothing changes. And maybe that is exactly what keeps it whole. You lead the cart to the open space near the mill. Shade. The wind turns the blades and the water runs in a monotonous rhythm. Everything works as it should, which in the Middle Ages is already luxury. The body still aches. But now the pain is old enough to seem part of who you are. The fever became a memory, the tiredness became a condition, and the road, that impatient teacher, finished the lesson without caring if you learned. The horse lowers his head and starts chewing the grass as if he had been there forever. There is a silent dignity in everything that still insists on living. You observe the repetitive movement and realize the absurdity of having crossed so much to arrive at something so identical. The trip was long, the days were hard, and the arrival is just an inverted mirror of the starting point. Deep down, every peasant knows. Nobody travels to change their life. They travel to continue the same one in another place. The wind blows and raises a little dust, dancing in the air before disappearing. The cart creaks, tired, but faithful, as if time itself was stored in there. The wood carries the marks of the road, scratches and cracks that tell stories nobody asked to hear. You look at them and understand that this is what remains of the journey. Not marks, nor glory, nor epiphany, just marked wood and memory of effort. In the field around, sounds mix. The beating of grain in the mill, the distant mooing, the wind dragging straw. None of them is beautiful, but all are real. And in the Middle Ages, the real is the rarest form of beauty. The world doesn't receive you with a party, nor with rest. It simply accepts you back, like someone admitting you are one more piece of the gear. The sun falls slowly, dyeing the stones and roofs a tired gold. Nothing shines for real, only reflects the little light that remains. The cart is motionless. The horse breathes heavy, and the air seems finally to fit in the lungs. Silence settles, but it isn't that of death. It is that of resignation, the kind of peace that comes not when things improve, but when you stop expecting them to improve. The thought, tired of thinking so much, quiets down, and it is at this point that the greatest irony of the trip reveals itself. The end of the road didn't bring rest, but it brought something rarer, understanding. Not about the world, but about the very absurdity of continuing to walk in it. The journey was never about arriving. It was about not breaking on the way, and the simple fact of still being whole is already almost heroic. The mill turns slow and constant, as if repeating the lesson the road taught. Nothing really stops. Everything just turns slowly until it seems motionless. The cart is part of this same cycle, and you too. Iron, sweat, earth, and time, all tied in the same invisible knot that keeps the world functioning. And there, under the sound of the wind and the creaking of wood, the day ends without ceremony. No angel sings, no revelation happens, only the tiredness that settles inside the body, like someone finally finding their own place. And for the first time in a long time, that is enough. The horse closes his eyes for an instant, and you almost believe he understands more than he shows. Maybe he really does. After all, those who carry the weight learn to accept destiny before those who drive. The wind diminishes, the light fades little by little. The world follows the same, and the sound of wheels, even stopped, still echoes in memory, reminding that every movement deep down is just insistence. Good night, tired listener, and until next time, sleep with a tired story.